Two men built one of the biggest rap empires in history, Jay-Z and Dame Dash. But when the money and power came in, everything fell apart. Did Jay really betray his brother, or did Dame destroy himself with ego? Once upon a time, Jay-Z and Dame Dash were inseparable. But when loyalty clashed with money, their empire crumbled. The question is who stabbed who in the back and whose vision turned into billions? Every empire stands on decisions, not just friendship. Jay-Z and Dame Dash built a dynasty, but one choice changed their lives forever. Today, we uncover the truth behind hip-hop's most infamous breakup. Jay-Z and Dame Dash once moved like brothers, building an empire together. But time, money, and choices tore that bond apart. Today, Dame openly calls Jay out, accusing him of turning his back after years of friendship and business. The question lingers, did Jay-Z truly abandon Dame, or is Dame caught in his own sense of entitlement? To understand this rift, we need to rewind the clock to the mid-90s, when two hustlers from the streets turned ambition into a music dynasty. Their journey wasn't polished or handed down by labels. It was raw, scrappy, and powered by survival instincts. Back in the early 1990s, Sean "Jay-Z" Carter was just another hungry rapper in New York City, trying to get his foot in the door. He had the skill, the flow, and the vision, but none of the record labels saw it. Meeting after meeting ended the same way, with polite rejection or flat-out indifference. To the industry, Jay was talented but not marketable. The doors of Def Jam, Sony, and other giants were closed, and it seemed like the city had no place for his voice. On the other side of town, Dame Dash was already making noise in Harlem. Dame wasn't an artist, but he had a hustler's spirit and an eye for opportunity. He was promoting parties, managing up-and-coming acts, and moving through rooms with the confidence of someone who believed he belonged at the top. Where Jay faced closed doors, Dame was busy finding windows to climb through. He understood that relationships and reputation mattered just as much as talent. When Jay and Dame crossed paths, it felt like a natural collision. Jay had the lyrical genius, but no platform. Dame had the business savvy, but needed a star to build around. Together, they created Roc-A-Fella Records in 1995, along with their third partner Kareem "Biggs" Burke. The label wasn't born out of luxury offices or corporate backing, it was built out of necessity. If no one else would give Jay a shot, they'd build their own machine. Their first major release, Reasonable Doubt, dropped in 1996. The album didn't climb straight to #1, but it planted a flag. Critics praised it, the streets embraced it, and slowly, the industry to take notice. Still, the climb was far from easy. Every step forward was fueled by Dame's relentless promotion and Jay's undeniable talent. Dame would storm into record stores, demand shelf space, and make sure DJs were spinning Jay's tracks. He wasn't asking for respect, he was taking it. What made their partnership unique was the balance. Jay was measured, calculated, and focused on his craft. Dame was loud, brash, and fearless in business. He wasn't afraid to curse out label executives, confront rivals, or fight for every dollar they were owed. Together, they represented two sides of the same coin, the quiet genius and the vocal general. By the late 90s, Roc-A-Fella had grown into more than just a label, it was a movement. With albums like Volume 2, Hard Knock Life, and artists like Beanie Sigel, Memphis Bleak, and State Property, they built a roster that gave the label weight in the streets and in the charts. Jay's music was crossing over to the mainstream, while Dame made sure the business stayed independent enough to avoid being swallowed whole by the majors. Their empire expanded beyond music. Roc-A-Wear, the clothing line they launched, exploded into a cultural phenomenon, pulling in hundreds of millions in revenue. Films like Paid in Full and State Property extended their reach into Hollywood. Roc-A-Fella wasn't just a record label anymore, it was a brand, a lifestyle, a symbol of Black ownership and ambition in an industry dominated by corporations. But underneath the success, cracks were already forming. Jay was beginning to think beyond the streets and the label, eyeing bigger corporate partnerships and long-term wealth. Dame, on the other hand, stayed rooted in his aggressive, no-compromise approach. What once made them unstoppable as a duo started pulling them in opposite directions. Still, in those early years, before the split and the lawsuits, Roc-A-Fella stood as proof that betting on yourself could change the game. Jay-Z and Dame Dash took rejection and turned it into one of the most influential empires in hip-hop history. The story began with one man who couldn't get signed and another who refused to be overlooked, and together, they built a dynasty that forced the world to pay attention. Their worlds collided thanks to DJ Clark Kent, who introduced Jay-Z to Dame through a group he was managing, Original Flavor. The connection was instant. Legend has it, they bonded over something as small as sneakers, Jay's spotless Air Force Ones. In the hood, sneakers were more than fashion. They were a signal of pride, attention to detail, and self-respect. Dame saw someone who cared about the little things the same way he did. Together with Kareem "Biggs" Burke, they launched Roc-A-Fella Records in 1995. The name itself was bold, both a nod to billionaire status and a sly reference to the Rockefeller drug laws. It was as if they were declaring war on an industry that had ignored them. Their message, "We're not just making music, we're building a legacy." At first, it was pure grind. No social media, no streaming. Just selling CDs out of car trunks, barbershops, and street corners. Dame handled the business, Jay focused on the art, and together they proved themselves. In 1996, Jay-Z dropped Reasonable Doubt. It wasn't an instant chart topper, but it quickly became a street classic. Hip-hop heads recognized it for what it was, a masterpiece. What made Roc-A-Fella different was ownership. While other artists were signing away their masters, Dame made sure they kept theirs. That single decision was revolutionary. And when Jay's second album, In My Lifetime, Volume 1, hit number 3 on the charts, it confirmed they weren't a one-hit wonder. Then came Volume 2, Hard Knock Life. That Annie sample turned into an anthem, breaking through every barrier hip-hop could dominate mainstream culture. The Hard Knock Life tour in 1999 shattered records, grossing $18 million and set a new standard for rap concerts. But Roc-A-Fella wasn't just about music. Dame had bigger dreams. In 1999, he launched Roc-A-Wear, and within 18 months, it was generating $80 million in sales. Hip-hop fashion was officially global, and Dame had seen it coming before anyone else. To him, hip-hop wasn't just a genre, it was the culture of the future. The empire kept expanding, signing new artists like Beanie Sigel, Memphis Bleek, and Cameron, producing films like Paid in Full and State Property, and building Roc-A-Fella into a movement. But success came with cracks. Dame himself admitted that money fed his ego. He was young, rich, and louder than ever. With a chauffeur-driven Maybach, personal chefs, and a sneaker collection in the thousands, Dame became just as famous for his lifestyle as for his business moves. Inside the industry, though, his aggressive style rubbed people the wrong way. Some started calling him Dame-Hole. His confrontational approach clashed with the polished corporate world Jay-Z was learning to navigate. Slowly, their visions stopped aligning. The story of Roc-A-Fella isn't just about music. It's about friendship, power, loyalty, and betrayal. Two men started as underdogs, built an empire from nothing, and then let ego and ambition tear it apart. And even today, the echoes of that split still shape hip-hop culture. By the early 2000s, Dame Dash had built a reputation that was starting to hurt him more than it helped. His fiery temper and obsession with control made him unpredictable in rooms filled with label executives and corporate leaders. Something as small as a disagreement over jacket branding could send him into a public meltdown, embarrassing his team and straining his partnership with Jay-Z. At first, Jay and Dame had been inseparable. They lived, breathed, and ate Roc-A-Fella, traveling together, plotting every move, and hustling non-stop to grow the brand. But as time went on, their paths began to drift. What Jay described as different focuses was really the slow unraveling of their brotherhood. They weren't in the same van anymore. They weren't chasing the same dream in lockstep. They were growing apart. By 2003, the empire they had built together was starting to rot from the inside. From the outside, Roc-A-Fella looked unstoppable. But behind the scenes, betrayal was brewing, the kind of cold calculation that would go down as one of hip-hop's most infamous breakups. The shift began when Jay-Z's ambitions stretched beyond music. By 2002, he wasn't just a rapper anymore, he was a brand. Corporations wanted him on billboards, in commercials, and at boardroom tables. He was playing a new game, one that Dame couldn't quite adapt to. Dame's confrontational style, which once made him a fearless leader, now made him a liability. The same aggression that impressed the streets was closing doors in the corporate world. Jay started evolving. Dame didn't. And that gap grew wider with each passing month. There were also whispers of personal drama adding fuel to the fire. Rumors swirled about both men's relationships with the late Aaliyah, first with Jay, later with Dame, creating quiet tension that only deepened the cracks in their business relationship after her tragic death in 2001. The first public sign of real division came in 2002. While Jay was away, Dame unilaterally promoted Cameron to vice president of Roc-A-Fella without consulting his partners. It was a bold move, too bold. When Jay returned, he immediately revoked the decision. That not only embarrassed Dame, but also left Cameron feeling humiliated in front of the entire industry. What should have been a simple internal choice turned into a power struggle, exposing a deeper question: who really ran Roc-A-Fella? Behind the scenes, Jay was already plotting his next chapter. In 2003, he began private conversations with Universal's CEO about stepping into an executive role. These weren't just casual talks, they were the first steps of Jay cutting ties and moving into a space Dame could never follow. To Jay, Dame had reached his ceiling. His aggressive style and refusal to adapt meant Roc-A-Fella would always be limited under his leadership. And Jay had no interest in being limited. When Dame eventually found out about these secret meetings, he reacted the only way he knew how, by confronting the situation head-on. He stormed into a Def Jam boardroom with a camera crew, ready to blow the lid off what he thought was a conspiracy against him. But the footage doesn't show a conspiracy. It shows a man watching his empire slip away in real time. Dame's anger was raw, his confusion almost painful to witness. But the unease on everyone else's faces told the bigger story. The game had changed. Jay was moving forward, and Dame was stuck fighting battles that no longer mattered. By the early 2000s, Dame Dash had become nearly impossible to work with. Even people closest to him, Day One supporters, tried to warn him that the walls were closing in. But instead of listening, Dame's ego twisted their advice into betrayal. He couldn't see that they were trying to save him from himself. The breaking point came in 2004. Jay-Z's long game finally revealed itself when Def Jam bought the remaining 50% of Roc-A-Fella for about $50 million. At the same time, Jay was offered the presidency of Def Jam in a $30 million deal. This was more than money, it was power. And the most valuable part wasn't the title or even the cash. It was a clause in the contract that gave Jay ownership of all his Def Jam masters. That meant control of his legacy, his catalog, and his future. For Jay, it was a once-in-a-lifetime move he couldn't refuse. But the cost was devastating for his partnership with Dame. To soften the blow, Jay offered him the full rights to the Roc-A-Fella name in exchange for Reasonable Doubt's master recordings. Dame refused. That decision, driven by pride, became the most expensive mistake of his life. To this day, Reasonable Doubt remains the only Jay-Z album he doesn't fully own, and Biggs has vowed never to sell. The betrayal was complete. Dame Dash, the man who had discovered Jay, built Roc-A-Fella brick by brick, and pushed the vision into reality, had been cut out of the empire he helped create. And the saddest part? It didn't have to end this way. If Dame had been willing to adjust his approach, maybe the partnership could have survived. But his refusal to evolve and Jay's ruthless ambition made the collapse inevitable. After the split, Dame's decline was brutal. The same man once worth $50 million was, by 2025, buried under $25 million in debt and filing for bankruptcy. His story became a cautionary tale about what happens when loyalty and ego clash with the cold rules of corporate America. The streets might reward authenticity, but boardrooms reward adaptation, and Dame never adapted. In 2004, he tried to bounce back with Dame Dash Music Group, signing Beanie Sigel and R&B singer Olivia. But without Jay's star power or deep industry connections, the label collapsed within 2 years, losing him more than $5 million. His philosophy didn't help either. Dame famously said he could never call another man boss, but in corporate America, that pride came with a heavy price. Opportunity after opportunity passed him by. Meanwhile, Jay's moves showed just how calculated his rise really was. In 2005, Dame sold his stake in Roc-A-Wear for $22 million, claiming he wanted to invest in Rachel Roy's fashion line. Only a year later, Jay sold the entire Roc-A-Wear brand to Iconics for $204 million. If Dame had held onto his 25% share, he could have walked away with roughly $51 million instead of $22 million. That single decision cost him nearly $30 million. Burn it all to the ground. Dame Dash's money problems didn't come out of nowhere. Even as his income dried up, he refused to change how he lived. He still spent millions on luxury cars, multiple homes, and keeping a huge entourage around him. Cameron would later say Dame blew more than $10 million during Roc-A-Wear's peak, on yachts, furs, and private jets. It was the kind of spending that looked good for the cameras, but quietly drained his empire. By the 2010s, things got even worse. Lawsuits began stacking up like bills you can't ignore. Between 2005 and 2020, Dame faced more than 50 different cases, everything from defamation to child support to tax evasion. One of the most damaging came in 2022 when filmmaker Josh Weber won an $823,000 judgment against him over the movie Dear Frank. Dame kept violating court orders, and by 2025, that judgment had grown to $4 million. His financial reality was brutal. By 2024, Dame owed $19.1 million in taxes and nearly $650,000 in unpaid child support across multiple mothers of his children. Courts finally ordered the sale of his last major asset, his 33.3% stake in Roc-A-Fella Records. In August 2024, it went up for auction and sold for just $1 million, the money going straight to creditors. Even his final link to Roc-A-Fella was gone. On September 4, 2025, Dame filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in Florida. The paperwork revealed just $4,350 in assets against $25 million in debt. The man who once had a $1 million fortune now listed only $100 in cash, a $500 phone, and some jewelry. The contrast with Jay-Z couldn't be sharper. By the same year, 2025, Jay's net worth had soared to $2.5 billion. His empire stretched from music to sports to luxury liquor, including Tidal, Roc Nation Sports, Das Cognac, and Ace of Spades champagne. Everything Jay touched turned into a major business play. And that's the core difference between the two. Dame prided himself on loyalty and keeping it real, while Jay always played the long game, calculating each move with business in mind. Dame's approach earned him respect in the streets. Jay's approach made him a billionaire. That divide still sparks debate. Should Jay have stepped in to help his old partner? Memphis Bleek touched on this in a 2025 interview, saying Jay's refusal to bail out Dame wasn't cold, it was growth. In his eyes, helping Dame would only enable bad habits, not fix them. The irony is painful. The very qualities that made Dame essential in Roc-A-Fella's rise, his confidence, his aggression, his refusal to bend, were the same traits that destroyed him when the industry shifted into corporate boardrooms. What worked in the streets backfired in business. And Dame wasn't the only one hurt. When Jay went solo, artists like State Property and Beanie Sigel, who had poured their energy into Roc-A-Fella, were left to fend for themselves. An entire ecosystem collapsed around the split. Today, Dame is still swinging, but not always in ways that help his reputation. In September 2025, he filed a $300 million defamation lawsuit against Cameron, and 50 sent over comments about Paid in Full. 50 mocked it, even suggesting AI wrote the complaint. Moves like this make Dame look desperate, not powerful. The deeper issue is that Dame still hasn't taken full responsibility for his own role in the downfall. He continues to blame Jay, liar Cohen, and the system for blackballing him, instead of admitting how his own behavior pushed people away. Without self-reflection, a true comeback feels almost impossible. Looking back more than 20 years, the lesson is clear. Jay's decision to cut ties was ruthless, but from a business perspective, it was brilliant. He knew staying tied to Dame would cap his potential, so he walked away and built an empire. Dame's story is both inspiring and tragic. He fought for artists when no one else would, built one of hip-hop's most legendary labels, and laid the blueprint for independence. But his refusal to adapt turned those same strengths into weaknesses. In the end, it's a tale of two hustlers, one who stayed loyal to the streets, and one who mastered the corporate game. One is still standing on top of the mountain. The other is left with memories of what once was. And that's the cold reality of the music business. Keeping it real might win you respect, but playing it smart can make you a billionaire.